Welcome to my channel, I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today I'm going to share to you some beginner micro four thirds lenses. Let's go! Before we continue with today's video, this is just a quick reminder for you to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. It will help me a lot to motivate me to make more videos for you. Alright, let's continue with the video. So in today's video, I'm gonna share a few lenses for you that I think are good beginner micro four thirds lenses. So these lenses that I pick are the ones that I think are most useful for beginners, especially if you're starting with micro four thirds and you're a beginner photographer. Alright, micro four thirds is quite a complete system, meaning that there are lots of choices when it comes to lenses because it's quite a mature camera system. So it can get a little bit overwhelming when it comes to choosing lenses. And I hope that this video will be able to help you a little bit to narrow down your choices when it comes to your first micro four thirds lenses. The lenses that I choose here, I think are the ones that really reflect the spirit of micro four thirds, meaning that they are small, lightweight, easy to carry around, they're sharp, and they're not too expensive, so they're perfect for beginner photographers, alright? So before we dive down into the lenses themselves, I just want to remind you once again that this is for beginner micro four thirds user, especially for photographers. If you're a videographer, or if you're using other camera formats, or if you're an expert of micro four thirds already, then I don't think that you will gain much from this video, but stick around anyway, see if you find something interesting from this video. And now let's start with the lenses themselves. First lens that I want to talk today for beginner micro four thirds lenses is the Panasonic Lumix 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. So when I first started with micro four thirds in 2014, I started with the Panasonic GX7 as my first camera body and this lens. Alright, so the GX7 already has a kit lens on it. It's the 14 to 42mm f3.5 to f5.6, but this is the first non-kit lens that I bought for that camera, and it performs wonderfully for my needs. So why do I think that this lens is a good beginner micro four thirds lens is because the fact that this is a super zoom lens. Alright, so meaning that you can go all the way from normal wide around 14mm all the way to 140mm on the telephoto end. So it can cover a lot of grounds when it comes to photography, and you know, it is small, it is lightweight relatively compared to other camera format when it comes to super zoom, and it has a great image quality. I don't find that this lens has any lack of sharpness or whatever. It's just perfect. It's just good enough for most of your needs and my needs as well. Alright, so yeah, this is a good beginner micro four thirds lens for you who doesn't really know what kind of focal length that you want to use in your photographs. Alright, a really great application for the 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6 is for travel. When you're traveling, you don't really know what you're gonna encounter, what you're gonna photograph during your travel. Sometimes, alright, most of the time I already know like where I'm going, but sometimes you just want to be spontaneous, and this kind of lens, the super zoom lens like the 14 to 140mm, is perfect for that because you can capture anything that's close, anything that's far. You can just zoom it in, you can just zoom it out, and you can capture everything with just a single lens. And that's I think that's a really great benefit of using a super zoom lens like this, especially in micro four thirds format where it's not becoming too large or too heavy to carry around. Alright, so this is not the only super zoom lens that I recommend. There's a newer version of this lens, the Mark II version of the 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6, which is slightly better, and it also has weather sealing. This version does not have weather sealing, so you have to be more careful when you encounter some rain or some weather elements. But the newer version, it has weather sealing, so it'll give you more peace of mind when you encounter some bad weather. Also, there's the Olympus version of the 14 to 150mm, and it's as good as this version of the lens. The difference between the Panasonic and the Olympus version is that the Olympus version doesn't have image stabilizer, so you have to rely on cameras that have internal body stabilization like the Panasonic GX8, the G85 or the Olympus camera bodies. Alright, there's also the Olympus 12 to 100, but that's a little bit pricey and a little bit more heavy. I think there's also the 12 to 200 from Olympus as well. I think that's a good recommendation as well if you don't mind the slightly smaller aperture. I think it goes from f4 to f6.3, but I'll correct it down below right here, the correct specification of that lens. Alright, but yeah, I think super zoom lens in Micro Four Thirds is a good beginner Micro Four Thirds lens for you, especially if you don't really know what kind of lens that you wanna get. Alright, so let's move on with the next lens. Alright, the next choice for beginner Micro Four Thirds lens is not a single lens, but a choices of some what I call to be normal focal lengths prime lens for Micro Four Thirds. So they are the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7 or the Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7 or either the Olympus or Panasonic 17mm or 25mm. Alright, so lots of choices right here. So why I'm recommending all these prime lenses for you to choose from? Alright, so basically when I first started with photography, I started with a 35mm lens on an APS-C Canon DSLR, so that turns it into like a 50mm, which in Micro Four Thirds is about 25mm, and for about a year I shoot only with that lens, and that's a really good training for both my eyes and for my senses to be adapted to that focal length, so that I can really easily pre-visualize, you know, the focal length of 35mm on an APS-C body. So when it comes to photographing or for some video works, I already know how tight or how wide 35mm is on that body. So I think that is a very important skill. Pre-visualization will really help you a long way when it comes to learning photography, as well as developing your skills more and more as you start to become more proficient with using your camera and so on. And that is when a normal focal length prime lens for Micro Four Thirds will make sense for you as a first beginner Micro Four Thirds lens. Alright, because you can start to learn pre-visualization easily using one of these lenses. Alright, what I mean by pre-visualization is like this. Right now I have this Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7. alright, and in my mind, because I use this lens so much when I first started with Micro Four Thirds as well, I can already imagine, like in my mind, how tight or how wide a 20mm is going to be. It's like this, you know, like this tight. If I'm seeing you right now, it's gonna be like this, and that is the pre-visualization skill that I just talked about earlier. Alright, and I really think that it's very beneficial for you. That's why I'm recommending one of these lenses for you to pick up and start to learn more about photography. Alright, so the choices are the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. This is the widest of them all. This is as wide as the normal camera on your smartphone. Alright, so you're already quite familiar with the focal length of your smartphone's camera. Then the 15mm will make more sense for you. Alright, this is as wide as that one. And then the next choice will be the Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7. This is tighter. It's tighter, but the good thing about the tighter lens is it'll give you more bokeh, you know, it'll give you more separation from the background and your subject will stand out more. And in between that, you have the Olympus 17mm f1.8. It's a great lens. I don't have it right now, but I used to have it. It's a great lens, alright, and that is a little bit wider than the 20mm, but not as wide as the 15mm. So it's a good in-between kind of focal length, alright. And the last choice will be either the Olympus or Panasonic 25mm, either f1.8 or f1.7 as in the Panasonic. It's gonna be the tightest of all the choices that I'm recommending to you today, and that means more background separation, better subject isolation, and you know, just overall more focused kind of pictures, you know. And you might think that it's good with a lens that is tighter because it'll give you more bokeh, more background separation, and a stronger subject, but sometimes you'd also need a lens that can give you a little bit more of the background, you know, with a wider normal focal length, because that will give you more context, and also wider lens is easier to shoot and to frame with. And yeah, so from all these choices, I want you to if possible, try it on the store or borrow it from someone and test them all out and see which one that you like the most, and then that's the one that you should get. Alright, after you get one of these lenses, all you need to do is just to practice using the lens. So just put it on your camera non-stop for a few months and just try to make yourself a self-disciplined practice to use that lens only without switching to any other lens, and just train yourself so that you're familiar with how tight or how wide the lens is, so that when you're framing something, you can already pre-visualize like what I mentioned before, and you'll have a better understanding of photography and the focal length in general. Alright, that's a good skill to have, and that's why I recommend this kind of lens for you. Also, these lenses, with the exception of the Leica 15mm f1.7, they're not that expensive, alright. This 20mm will cost you about $400 or something, or maybe around $300. The Olympus 17, the Olympus 25, the Panasonic 25, they're not that expensive. So yeah, they're good beginner lens, and they'll give you a step up of image quality when compared to your kit lens, and also they're a good practice lens to train yourself to pre-visualize. Alright, so let's move on with the next lens. Alright, the next recommendation for beginner micro four thirds lens is one of the medium telephoto prime lens for micro four thirds. So that means either the Olympus 45mm f1.8 or the Panasonic version, the 42.5mm f1.7. So while the lenses that I recommend before will give you normal focal length, meaning something that you can use for general purpose photography, for your everyday photography, this kind of lens that I recommend right now, the medium telephoto lens, is not something that you can use for every kind of photography. It's a more specialized tool. So this is a medium telephoto focal length around 45mm, and this happens to be the Olympus version of the 45mm f1.8. It's a great lens when it comes to, again, isolating your subject, separating the background, give you bokeh, make the subject stand out. This will be more potent when compared with the 25mm of the previous lens category that I recommend to you. And the usage for that is to make your subject more stand out in your photography. So this will give you bokeh, alright? Bokeh now starts to become a cliche, like everybody wants to make bokeh pictures because they're beautiful, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and this is the cheapest way to give you the most bokeh for your money, alright? If you're deciding to have one of this kind of medium telephoto focal length lens for you, then I recommend you still keeping the kit lens that comes with your camera, because while this is a very useful lens for those kind of bokeh pictures, you might still need a regular kit lens to cover the regular kind of everyday general purpose photography focal length. Alright, so have two lenses. One is this one, the medium telephoto prime lens, and the other one is your kit lens, and you'll be covered for a lot of things that might come in your way. Alright, last but not least, the last lens that I will recommend for a beginner micro four thirds lens is actually your kit lens. Alright, when it comes to micro four thirds, the kit lenses, they are not that bad, alright? They're still sharp, they still give you great image quality. In fact, all of the micro four thirds lenses, kit lens that I've tried so far, they are more than good enough for what I need. The only problem with the kit lenses are that they don't have large aperture, they only have like around f5.6 at the telephoto end, and maybe 3.5 or f4 at the widest end. And although that doesn't sound like you can do a lot of low light photography using them, they're probably more than enough for most of your needs. So if you have the kit lens, just stick onto it, it'll be good. The Panasonic 12 to 32mm is a good kit lens as far as I know. My 14 to 42mm lens that comes with the Panasonic GX7 is also a great lens, and it is sharp, it gives me a great image quality, and there's no problem with using kit lens. Alright, even my Olympus kit lens 14 to 42mm that comes with my already sold EPL6 is also good, comparable with the Panasonic 14 to f2.42. So don't throw away your kit lens and just stick to them if you don't really like have a personal preference around the lenses, and if you just started using micro four thirds camera as a beginner. All right, the point that I'm trying to come across to you when it comes to using your kit lens as your first micro four thirds beginner lens is I want to spread this idea of minimalism, you know. Try to fight that gear acquisition syndrome. Owning more lenses doesn't make you a better photographer, but learning how to use your tools and training yourself, trying to be disciplined and trying to practice and get better over time will make you a better photographer. Alright, so that's what I really want to say when it comes to using your kit lens as your first micro four thirds lens. Alright. Honorable mention for beginner micro four thirds lens is the f2.8 zoom lens for Panasonic and Olympus, and that is either this Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8 that's currently recording this video right now, or the Olympus version, the 12 to 40mm f2.8, and they're really great lens. They have f2.8 aperture, which is relatively large enough for low light photography and stuff like that. They have the flexibility of a zoom, great build quality, great image quality, but the only problem why I don't recommend them for a first beginner kind of micro four thirds lens is because they are expensive. So unless you're really serious and you want to start to invest into micro four thirds, I don't think they're a wise choice. Alright, and yeah, but once you start to become more involved with photography, you start to become more serious, you want to take it a step further than the lenses that I just recommended before, then the f2.8 zooms will start to make sense. Alright, so in conclusion, I think these are the lenses that I will recommend for you for your beginner micro four thirds lenses. Alright, just stick with one or two lenses. You don't have to buy them all. Alright, you just need to have at least the kit lens and one of the other lenses that I recommend to you. And the reason for that is because I want to, stop a little bit of this gear acquisition syndrome that's been happening with people. Alright, people think that buying more gear is better for them, but the reality is owning more gear doesn't make you better, as I said earlier. Alright, and what makes you a better photographer is to learn how to use your tool, learn how to use your lens, become familiar with it, and train yourself, be disciplined when it comes to your practice. Just practice photographs, just photograph as much as you can, and by doing that I think that you'll become a better photographer rather than by buying a new lens. Alright, so go ahead, practice using your new lens, and I hope that this video is useful for you. And yeah, if you have any questions about any of these lenses, or if there are any other lens that you want to recommend for a beginner micro four thirds lens, please comment down below. Alright, I want this to be a little kind of community thing where we can all contribute, not just me but every one of us who watch this video can contribute something, so that if there's someone who come across and find your comments or watch this video, then they'll be able to gain something useful from it. Alright, so I hope this has been useful. Please don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Alright, thank you and goodbye.